everyone's talking about the benefits of fish oil, but what we don't really talk about is how are those benefits really achieved? These fat-soluble vitamins, if they're toxic, they're seeping into our system, they're staying there, they're not water-soluble, so we're not really peeing them out, and they can have a major detrimental impact on people's health and wellness journeys.
It's really easy to run the test to see things like, do I have enough magnesium? Is my methylation working properly? Am I detoxifying well? And when you are able to address each part of detoxification, which really is running on nutrients, and so many people are deficient, it all works much smoother and is more effective.
Every chronic illness is impacted by nitric oxide. Every chronic illness is impacted by a lack of vitamin D3. And yet, nobody's talking about how to supplement or raise your nitric oxide. Natural ingredients will safely signal your body and say, produce nitric oxide.
Welcome to episode 2 of Supplements Revealed. In episode 1, we heard from the likes of Dr. Stephen Gundry. What an amazing human being, brilliant and great information that to me is truly life-changing. But it doesn't stop there. In episode 2, we have a lineup for you that's going to be a real gift to you. The wisdom, information, and scope of what is covered is something that is transformative. It is our desire to have a massive impact on your life through this information. And I know that there is a lot of it. This is a big world to sort through, which is why we encourage you to also own Supplements Revealed. Not only will you be supporting our mission, but it's also something that on a personal level will pay dividends to you and the ones that you care about for years to come. So get ready. We are action-packed in this episode, and I'm looking forward to delivering it to you right now. Next up, we have Evan Demarco, and the scope of his knowledge is breathtaking. He plays a key and maybe even pivotal role in the supplement industry. You will hear throughout this entire series about source materials, how important source materials are. And in Evan's case, that's the role he plays. He is the person that gets the source materials and brings them to the manufacturers. So he sees it all. He's seeing how people are manufacturing, what they're buying, what they're putting together, and in the end, what's making it in the bottle that you're buying. So in that case, this is an important understanding in the supply chain of supplementation. This is something to understand, and once you do, you're going to have a much better stance to be able to make better decisions from. So, enjoy this interview. Evan, thanks for taking the time to sit down and talk to us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to this conversation because we're having a lot of interaction around the source of things and how important that source is, and you're a man who could speak to that based on what you do. So tell us about your background.
Well, it's an interesting background. So currently I'm the Global Director of Market Development for the KD Pharma Group. And KD Pharma Group is the largest manufacturer of prescription-grade omega-3 products in the world. And then the third largest manufacturer of dietary supplement omega products in the world. So I'm kind of further up the value chain. I'm, the fishing vessels, how is that oil sourced? How does that oil get extracted and then ultimately down to the consumer? So more of, the manufacturing and product development side versus the brand side. And I kind of got to this place in a rather unique way. Started out as an English and journalism major on a baseball scholarship and got injured, lost my scholarship, and basically didn't know what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So I kind of bounced around, did some writing, found out I couldn't make any money in that, became an investment banker, got the three-piece suits, a little bit of like what we're wearing now. Recognized I didn't like that. It was, it just wasn't everything that I was excited about. I wasn't passionate about it. So once I left that, I had an opportunity to acquire a sports nutrition company. And sports had always really been the focus of my life. You know, growing up in a small town, sports was your escape. It was your way out. It was just the thing to do to keep you from getting in trouble. So getting back into sports was something that I'd always really found was driving my decisions, and I was so passionate about it. But I wanted to understand the product development side of things. So I didn't have the science background. I'd have the business background. So then I went back to school and I studied all the things that no one ever wants to study: your organic chemistry, your biochemistry, literally taking classes on product development and how things, work, interact. And so what I would do, I was in school at night, and I would take everything I was learning at night into the lab the next day and hound our lab technicians, our product dev people, and they hated me. I was just a guy with a yellow legal pad saying, "Hey, can we do this? Can we do this?" And they're like, "Kid, go away, go sell something, go." But it gave me a really interesting and unique perspective on product development. And one of the first things that I found out as I went through this is that product development for me had to be personal. I wasn't going to make anything that I myself wouldn't take, and now that I'm a father, I wouldn't make anything that I wouldn't give to my kids. And so as I've kind of ventured past that company, sold that, ended up consulting for multiple companies in the market, doing product development, doing marketing, building marketing strategies. At last Trek, I think I had about $500 million in retail sales with some of the products that I developed. I really got to understand the potential of what dietary supplements can do if they're done right. But I also got to see what could be done, all the harm that comes from not doing it right, from just making a quick buck, from all the people who are just trying to get into this business, throw a label on something, sell something, and then get out after basically everyone finds out that their product is less than what's on the label.
Yeah. So in your area now, fish oil is a huge marketplace, right? And,
Yeah,
and
number one seller in the supplements.
It is number one. Okay,
Yep.
So I wasn't sure about that. And it's in the last decade or so, I mean, it's really come on the scene, and it's been something that has been highly touted with extraordinary health benefits, et cetera.
Yeah.
And and you could be completely how can I put it? Transparently critical of this arena because you know it so well.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe let's start with the bad, then we'll get to the good. We'll end on a positive note. So
Yeah.
what are some of the challenges in that area as far as what products are being put into the market, sold as fish oil supplements with all these benefits, but as a consumer I should be concerned about?
That is a great question, right? And the one thing about fish oil is there's good fish oil and there's bad fish oil, but it's not like the rest of the dietary supplement industry where you might have fillers, you might have things that aren't really, label claims aren't accurate. Fish oil basically comes down to how it's concentrated. So we'll do, I'll kind of explain the whole process, but basically most fish oil is sourced from Peruvian anchovies and sardines, sustainable fishing grounds off of coast of South America. So these little fishies are taken to a factory and they're literally just pressed. And so what you have is fish oil and fish meal. And that fish meal is sent off to like fertilizer factories, pet food factories throughout the world. That fish oil that's left over is what's commonly referred to as 1812 or crude oil. And that 1812 is indicative of the EPA and DHA concentration in the oil, 18% EPA, 12% DHA, for a total of about 30% omegas. The rest of that 70% is all the bad stuff, right? It's pro-inflammatory omega-6, it's saturated fat, it's cholesterol, all the things that we actually consider bad fats. So here's where it gets a little funny, right? Everyone really knows about the benefits of omegas. It's impossible to not turn on a TV and see, whether it's Larry King pitching his product or, everyone's talking about the benefits of fish oil, but what we don't really talk about is how are those benefits really achieved. So you go to your really big box, retail store where you're going to get your 3-year supply of toilet paper and 2-year supply of fish oil, for like $10. And what you're usually getting is that 1812, that really, cheap, minimally refined crude oil. And there's really nothing wrong with that, except that here in America, we've kind of really screwed ourselves up. So if we take a step back and we look at what Americans were like 200 years ago, you had this omega-6 to omega-3 ratio that was like 4-1. And I think most doctors kind of agree that that's an optimal ratio. But now with the modern Western diet, our sedentary lifestyle, McDonald's, Taco Bell, all the things that we should not be eating, but we seem to consume in epic quantities, that ratio has jumped to a staggering like 20 to 25 to 1. Wow. Meaning you have, for every omega-6 molecule, for every 20 of those, you only have one omega-3. Now, that becomes hyper pro-inflammatory. So when you take this really cheap fish oil, that's got all of that extra omega-6 on it, you think that you're doing something good for your heart, for your brain, for your eyes, for your joints. But you could be exacerbating an already kind of tumultuous situation just because of the modern Western lifestyle. So the conversation about fish oil becomes very academic. Is, how do you concentrate it up? What is the proper ratio? And with 22,000 clinical studies on the benefits of fish oil, it really becomes like almost like this academic war of which one is best, which one is worst. But what we do recognize is that there is a great way to extract some of those bad fats, concentrate it up, and then start to take a more concentrated fish oil. And this really becomes the education platform, right? Because people see fish oil and they equate it with omega-3. So you go to your Costco and you say, oh, fish oil, I'm going to take that. But it's, the hard challenge for us is to educate the consumer that if you see 1,000 milligrams of fish oil, it might only have 300 milligrams of omega-3s. And those are really the beneficial things that we're looking for.
And that's one of the things that we should be reading on the menu. I guess as you're describing, if we're looking at these labels and it has this menu of what's in there, you want to see how much of it is omega-3 versus fish oil. And this is an interesting thing because my initial instinct would have been, well, listen, if it exists in the fish in nature this way in these ratios, then it's probably a good thing. But I guess what you're saying for the typical lifestyle, this is why you want to concentrate on the omega-3 side because we're out of balance in the way that we're experiencing the rest of our lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you look at the diet of man 200 years ago, and it wasn't Taco Bell, it wasn't McDonald's, it wasn't, the diet fat of the week, the keto, the Atkins, whatever it was. And so, we had more of a balanced diet, which included, for a lot of people, especially in coastal areas, kind of that Mediterranean diet, a lot of fresh fish, vegetables, things that really help to keep that ratio in check. And so this becomes kind of the fun thing, right? In the academic, people are like, oh, well, exactly like you said, well, this is how it was found in nature. But the problem is that we've changed our environment. We've changed the way that we eat. We changed the way that we live. So that argument of, well, this is how it was found in nature 200 years ago doesn't apply because we've kind of messed ourselves up. So it's really up to us in the dietary supplement world to address the needs of the modern consumer, to look at what we've done to our lives and then create products that, match those needs accordingly.
So we have a dilemma with the pollution in our oceans, right? And so now there's a concern saying, well, if we have fish that are sourced from polluted waters and we're concentrating their oils, how do we purify, or is there a methodology in purifying the oil so that you're not getting all this toxic stuff in it?
There is, and that is a great question, right? Because this is one of the things that, we have to acknowledge what we've done to our environment. The plastics, we've got an island the size of Texas, full of plastic floating in the ocean. There's actually like sushi restaurants in Japan that are running Geiger counters over their fish because of Fukushima. So it's impossible to ignore what we've done to the supply chain in fish and fish oil. Luckily, there's some great technologies that allow us to extract all of that stuff out. Supercritical, superfluid chromatography, some stuff that really just uses CO2 as an extraction process. And there's a lot of Chinese companies that do fish oil extraction that will do harsh chemicals, that will do some stuff that we don't want. But there's some great companies that really do it right. And as a result, GOED, which is a kind of a governing body for all fish oil, has set these standards of what you should be looking for. So I always tell people when you're picking a fish oil, look for things like that. Look for your NSF labels. Look for your GOED labels. Look for those little icons.
Where would you see this? So there'll be basically certification icons that would be on the label.
Yeah.
So let's do those slowly because this is why I want people to understand. Say, hey, you're about to buy a product. Look for this on the label so you're getting the right thing. So can you be a little bit more detailed about these certifications?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I really think are important personally. MSC, Marine Stewardship Council, is one. That lets you know that product came from sustainably sourced fishing grounds. Mm-hmm. That's a big one, right? Because if we're just out fishing to fish, we're going to lose our feedstock. Right. And I think so go the oceans. The rest of us are not far behind. So MSC is a big one. GOED, which is actually the global organization of EPA and DHA, it's a nonprofit organization that actually sets the limits on everything from heavy metals, all the toxicities associated in PCBs, and so they've created very strict regimens on what you can have in that fish oil. And if you don't pass that, then you don't get that.
Do they actually independently test, or do you just report to them?
They don't test, they set the standards, and then all of the companies out there that want to be in partnership with GOED have to provide test results that meet those GOED requirements. Yeah.
And you'd see, was that like a GOAD on a label?
GOED. Yep.
ED rather
Yep.
on a label. Okay.
Yep, you see that? I like NSF for sport, and all of these things. So, and then it becomes, so you see all of these logos on the back of a bottle, GOAD, Marine Stewardship Council, NSF for sport. And then it becomes a question of price, right? Because people are like, well, I can just buy this fish oil cheaper. Yes, you can. But the more that you see of those more certifications, the better the fish oil, the higher the concentration, you're going to pay for that. And then it becomes a question of, do you really value what you're putting in your body and what the end result is?
Well, and if you're going to spend money on putting something in your body, then I think it's implied, right?
Yeah.
That you value something. You're trying to take it. You're going to make an investment. And in fish oil, in some respects in nutrition, the context is, well, you have expensive urine. Nothing's getting absorbed, so you're spending this money and it's washing right through you. That's a whole conversation in of itself. But fish oil can actually hurt you, right?
It can.
I mean, bad fish oil. Not only will it not have a beneficial effect, it could actually have a deleterious effect.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's there's so many things that we talk about, right? It's like, and I always do this a thought experiment, right? Is go to your freezer, take a fillet of salmon out, put it on your counter, and then walk away from your house for a month and come back. And what is your house going to smell like, right? So that's oxidized fish.
Right.
And if that fish oil is not produced properly and it's oxidized like that, it's the same thing. Are you going to sit down at your kitchen table and eat that 3-month-old or month-old salmon? Probably not. But yet, because it's in a soft gel and because it's got a pretty label on it, people are like, oh, it must be good for me. And that really becomes a problem, right? Is these fat-soluble vitamins, if they're toxic, they're seeping into our system, they're staying there, they're not water-soluble, so we're not really peeing them out. And they can have a major detrimental impact on people's health and wellness journeys.
So you're at the the top of the supply chain now in this arena. And for a lot of the retail products that consumers are buying right now, or the prescription side of this, which I'd like to say, is there really a difference between the two? We could talk about that in a moment. But you're supplying both sides of this, down the chain. So you're sourcing, and then you guys have a manufacturing practice that I'm assuming is compliant with all these things that you're talking about. So speak to that for a moment. Like, what is your process that makes your fish oil high quality?
Great question. So we've got that 1812, right? That stuff that's in South America, and you do your little Indiana Jones map, and it goes across the Atlantic to Bexbach, Germany, which is the most landlocked place for fish oil. I still haven't quite figured out the logistics on this one, but there's a great plant there, and this plant has 5 different extraction technologies, and that's urea precipitation, superfluid chromatography, supercritical extraction, silver nitrate, and all of these really cool technologies are used to basically separate out the constituent parts of the fish oil. EPA, DHA, DPA, cholesterol, sat, fat, omega-6. And then so what we're left with are just lakes of these constituent parts that are clean. They've been processed, they've been validated to remove all of those toxins, the PCBs, and so you have this great clean oil. And then we get to kind of put them back together, for different things. And so the beauty of fish oil, or the beauty of omegas, is that with 22,000 clinical studies, each one kind of focuses on something different. We've got EPA as like, oh, this is your heart healthy, joint healthy product. We've got DHA, which is your brain, your eye, your prenatal. Right now we're talking about DPA, which is fascinating because the whole conversation about fish oil originated when Dr. Jorn Dyerberg gets on a sled with some dogs and goes up and studies the Inuit population because he wants to understand why they have the lowest incident of cardiovascular disease per capita, and especially in a place where they're not exactly living off of fresh fruit and vegetables and things like that. So he gets up there and he finds that their predominant dietary staple is DPA, which now we kind of call the missing omega. So he comes back and he publishes his findings, and everyone is like, oh, hey, this is a great thing. We should be doing this, for general health and wellness. But the problem is that there wasn't a viable source of DPA at the time unless we wanted to go club a baby seal. And most people aren't going to feel really good about taking that pill. So we turned to the next best thing, which was EPA and DHA from these fish. So the whole industry has been evolving with the science. What's commercially viable? What can we study? And so now we're at that place where we've got all of these different parts of the fish oil, the omegas, and we can put them back together in really cool combinations. Something that for prenatal really focuses on eye and brain health with the DHA, but throw some EPA in there. So you're talking about inflammation resolution. So it's fascinating science, and we've just really kind of scratched the surface in the last 10 years on what these polyunsaturated fatty acids can do if they're made properly.
Now, is there currently any conclusion around the right ratios or the best ratios based on all these, these 22,000 studies?
Personally, I think it's like 1 to 1.
Yeah.
1 to 1 to 1, and throw some DPA in there for good measure. What really we need to be doing, though, is looking at kind of from a holistic perspective, right? If you're just looking at fish oil to solve all of your problems and you're not eating healthy and you're not working out and you're not kind of doing all the other things, it's not a silver bullet.
Right.
But if you are doing a lot of those other things, then your body is really good at kind of optimizing what you're taking in. And so a lot of the research is showing that it really doesn't matter as long as you're taking in the higher concentrates and allowing it to metabolize properly.
So if you were going to store to buy a fish oil supplement for yourself, so I know that like you're saying, hey, it's debatable, et cetera, but if you were looking at the label, what ratio would you get for yourself?
I like 1 to 1.
Okay.
And here's something interesting, right? So, when we come into the world, breastfeeding, our predominant omega source during the time that our brains actually grow the most is DHA. And then it's interesting, right? Because, you're breastfeeding, you're getting a lot of DHA, you're actually getting a lot of something called alpha GPC, which is a phospholipid, which really helps in the absorption of these polyunsaturated fatty acids, especially when we're an infant. And then most people stop breastfeeding between 6 and 12 months, according to the American College of OBGYNs. And then from there, we don't really take in a lot of omegas. Not a lot of 1 and 2 year olds like fillets of salmon. They like mac and cheese. And so there's really this interesting evolutionary process when we look at our intake of these omegas. So most people will go to like their 30s, 40s, sometimes 50s, and then they start taking EPA.
Right.
But really a lot of cognitive decline, a lot of the issues that we see, especially nowadays with the number of people being diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia, is systemic from lack of DHA in the brain. So I'm a big believer that you kind of have to have that. I mean, that's really, if you don't have your brain, you don't have anything. So, keeping our brains healthy, our eyes healthy with DHA. And we can't ignore all of the screen time. We can't ignore what we're doing to our eyes. So having that one in there is kind of essential. But I also like the joints. I also like the cardiovascular benefits of EPA. So 1 to 1 is, a really long answer is 1 to 1.
Okay, if we look at the consumer products versus the prescription products, I have to imagine one difference is the fact that in the prescription product, it was used in clinical trials that where health claims could be made that otherwise can't be made. But as far as what's actually in the pill, is it really any different? No. Okay. In a word, no.
No. In a big word, no.
Yeah.
But omegas are really that one that exists in a gray area, right? Because there's all of this clinical work that's been done for the prescription products. The ones that are being used to lower cholesterol levels or to help augment healthy cholesterol. But there's really no difference. It's the same stuff. Wow. It's.
And as your company's supplying it, I mean, literally, and not kind of abstractly the same stuff. It's literally the same stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, and there are some varying differences, right? So you look at some of the prescription products, and those might be really higher dosages. And typically what we find in this one is that a clinical dose is used to fix a problem. You've been diagnosed with some cardiovascular issue. You've got cholesterol issues. So the difference really is not necessarily the product itself, but it's the dosage. It's like you need 4 grams of this really high concentrate EPA to address your triglyceride levels. Right. Whereas for the rest of us who are just looking to maintain, a health and wellness journey, the lower dosage, you could get away with 1 or 2 grams. So that's really the biggest, deciding factor there.
And as far as the daily amount that someone would take for supplementary purposes, what do you recommend?
That's a great question, right? And I think I'm going to answer this in kind of a long way because I talk a lot about this in podcasts and on TV when we're discussing omegas or anything in the dietary supplement industry. But the problem is our advice on what we're taking and why we're taking it is usually coming from the way wrong person, right? It's the mailman, it's your sister, it's Google, which we know is always true, right? So you have these data points that they're so subjective. I always recommend, like, use a diagnostic test to figure out why or if you should be taking something. And with omegas, there's a great one. You can go to your doctor and you can get a lipid profile. You can go to like Omega Quant, and you can get they'll send you a kit at home. You get you prick your finger, send in a dried blood spot, and then they'll actually tell you, where your omegas are. They actually have this really cool thing called an omega index. And it's kind of interesting, right? Because it's after 30 years of all of this research, they've been able to quantify this scale. And they said that the average American exists between a 2 and a 3 on this scale. Mm-hmm. And if you can get to an 8, you're 5 times more likely to reach your 80s without incidence of Alzheimer's, dementia, or cardiovascular disease. So with this test, you can basically say, okay, now I know how much I need to take. And there's some really cool graphs in there. Say, okay, if you want to get to an 8 based off your age, your body weight, and all of this, you take X.
It's Omega Quant?
Omega Quant, yes.
So you could Google that and you'll be able to find it, and it's a self-test.
It's a self-test, yeah.
Wow.
Or you can go to your doctor and get a lipid profile. But the great thing about these tests it gives us a roadmap to success for supplements, right? Otherwise, we're just taking things in a vacuum. But if we actually take a diagnostic test and say, okay, this is where I want to be, then we get to back into what we should be taking, how much we should be taking, and how often.
What's great about that is, because supplementation typically is a shot in the dark, right? Mm-hmm. So what's great about this is having an outcome, saying not only is it telling me that I need it, but I can also see if after taking it for a while, it's having any effect or my body's utilizing it.
Absolutely.
So that's a really great piece of advice. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And then I imagine that the logic is that if you're lower on that scale, you want to take more quantities of it until you see yourself getting up higher, and then you'd start to maybe back it down.
Yeah. And here's something else interesting, right? The problem with the supplement industry is that it has to make money, right? Yeah. But it makes a lot of money. As we know, this is, $100 billion annual business globally. What a lot of these brand marketers will not tell you is that you shouldn't be taking this every day, right? It's still kind of a pharmaceutical model. So we want you to take our product every single day. That's how we get EBITDA. Mm-hmm. I'm a big believer in fat cycling, right? Mm-hmm. Like, don't take a omega-3 every single day. Take it for 6 weeks and then take a couple weeks off. Allow your body to metabolize a lot of that stuff. Let it be hungry for more of those. So, if some of those fat solubles are kind of starting to go a little rancid in your system, allow your body to metabolize those. Get off of, get it out of your system, and then, start back up again.
So that's, actually something that I believe the thinking around that is becoming more prevalent now, saying, it shouldn't be one thing consistently throughout your life. There's got to be cycling, because that would mimic kind of ancestral patterns.
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
But that's very contrary to the commercial aspects of the dietary supplement industry.
And kind of contrary to the way that humans like to behave. They like their rituals, right?
Yeah.
In order for something to become a part of their life, get up, brush your teeth, take your supplement, and you just want to do that every single day. So it becomes sort of mindless. And it happens, as compared to saying, on my calendar after 6 weeks, I'm going to say, okay, we're going to remind myself to stop taking certain supplements and remind myself again some weeks later. So so this stuff becomes work, but that's what achievement requires, is
exactly
some conscious attention, saying don't be mindless about it, put some thought into it. So I could feel good about the fact that I'm buying a quality product based on the recommendations you made, looking for certain certifications, et cetera, that I'm not going to go to my doctor for a prescription to get a better product than the one that I could buy off the shelf, as long as I'm doing my research or my homework on it. And that's kind of an important thing, saying I'm self-empowered. I don't have to do this through a physician.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's the great thing about a lot of physicians right now is we're starting to see that more open mindset. It's not just let's pump you full of pharmaceutical products and mask a problem. It's let's integrate a lot of different things in this holistic approach to people's health, their health journeys. And so, the internet, all of these dietary supplements, all of the information available allows people to be a little bit more in control. Mm-hmm. I always recommend, like, if you're taking something, run it by your doctor, run it by your physician, but make sure your physician is open to that. If they're not a physician that's, in any way believes in dietary supplements, well, what answer are you going to get?
Right.
So if you're working with a good practitioner, you're looking at blood results, blood tests. If you're actually taking supplements for the right reasons, then they can have such a profound impact, right? And that's one of the big things I always laugh about is why are you taking it? I mean, that's the big question you should always ask yourself when you're putting a pill in your mouth is why?
Right.
Is it because my mailman told me so, or is it because my doctor looked at my blood work and said, well, you should really do this. You're anemic. Let's put you on a great iron for 6 months and then we'll reevaluate.
Or if you saw the infomercial or what have you.
Exactly.
There's certainly a lot of marketing in that $100 billion industry.
A lot.
And maybe that's something else we could speak to in a moment. But backing up to your last point, most, I would say, typical or traditional medical physicians probably aren't that experienced in understanding supplementation, its applications, how to identify what might be useful, et cetera. So how do you find a doctor that you can have consultation with around this?
I think, looking at someone that is a great question. And I think, if you're looking at a traditional hospital setting, that's going to be challenging, right? Because the typical doctor setting is really it's a machine shop. It's that doctor has to see X number of patients a day. That means they can only spend X number of minutes. It's like you're not going to have that conversation. But if you actually Google certain doctors, just doctors who are more holistic, you're going to find some people, and it requires a little work. Like you said, it's you gotta dig deep, but it's just like anything. Interview these people. They're going to be along for the ride of your life. This is the person that's going to be riding shotgun in everything that you want to accomplish in your health and wellness journey. Make sure it's a good fit.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with interviewing 5, 10, 20 doctors until you find that person that gets you. It's like, it's swipe left, swipe right, and find the right one.
And today,
Maybe that's a great app. Let's,
So you might just come up with a great idea right on the spot here. You're walking down the hall and you can swipe one way or the other, saying which doctor in this building is the one that's the right one for me. That's great. So now, if I'm entering maybe the general world of nutrition, which I'm sure you have familiarity with.
Do a lot of products in that as well.
Yeah, so you do a lot of products in that arena. What are some other considerations? Like you're saying, here's the top 3 things consumers should be wary of in the general supplementation world. Like I have people ask me all the time. I'll just give you an example. What is the best multivitamin? I'm trying to get it all to cover all my bases. What kind of advice do you give people?
That's another great question. Here's my thing. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you would walk into a vitamin retail shop and you could expect that they were going to do their due diligence, that company was going to do the due diligence to put quality products on the shelf. The internet has changed all of that. Yeah. Amazon has changed all of that. So there's no real system of checks and balances in the e-commerce platform that says this company, Joe's supplement company from, who knows where, has done the due diligence to put quality products in that jar, in that bottle. So when it comes to those, I'm always really leery of a e-commerce only company and one that's not willing to put their C of A's on on the website.
C of A's.
A certificate of authenticity, or so that shows actually what the test results are. Now, there's a great company in the e-commerce space called iHerb.com, and they're the second largest vitamin retailer globally behind Amazon, and they wholesale everybody's products. You can't get on their website unless your specs meet their independent test, and they put that on every single product. So you can go to iHerb and you can look at anything, whether it's a vitamin C, a multivitamin, an omega, and you can click on that product and you can see all of the testing that was done to validate that everything that's on that label is what's actually in that bottle.
Yeah, so and that's you're hoping that you have somebody that's got some expertise in the arena that can kind of filter that for you. So and you feel good about iHerb that's a good source that does their due diligence.
It is, and the beauty is that they collect products from all over the world, so it's not just their brand or one specific brand. So you can look. If someone says you need to be on an omega, well, you can go there and you can say, well, here are the top 3 selling omegas, and I look at them and it's like, you can actually do your research there. Amazon doesn't have that. No. So you type in omegas or vitamin C or multivitamin, and you've got 30,000 options, and there's no guarantee that if you hit that buy button, that what shows up on your door the next day through Amazon Prime is actually what's in that bottle is what's on that label. So it becomes a little bit more work for the consumer to really vet these products. And then I say from that point is once you vet a product, look at that company as a whole. Does that company have multiple products that you should be looking at? And there are some great brands out there that do things very well. And with that comes a little bit of cost. So I always say, if you want good, you're going to have to pay for it. But, you put good in, you're going to get good out.
Right. It's actually a better investment than saying, "Oh, I got something cheaper that does nothing for me."
Exactly.
Throwing your money away.
Well, and I think, to that point is like on some of that cheaper stuff, worst case scenario or best case scenario, maybe it does something, maybe it does nothing. Worst case scenario is you could actually be harming yourself. And that's something to be aware of when it comes to that little extra investment. We're looking for more time, right? That's what all of this is. It's about giving ourselves more time to do the things that we want to do. No one takes a supplement thinking, well, I'm going to die tomorrow. It's all about time. So, extrapolate that concept over 10, 20, 30 years. If general health and wellness, if living the life of your dreams is what you're going after, why not put the best stuff in your body?
Supplement industry has got a history of, how could I put it, fads that come in and out, right? So fish oil, here to stay, not a fad?
Oh, it's definitely.
Yeah.
It's funny. I'm finishing up another book on fish oil, and so I've got a couple books on fish oil. But this one is actually the history of it, and I look at my personal history of fish oil. I come from a very Italian family. My grandmother, off the boat, and this Italians back in the 20s and 30s, cod liver oil, right?
Yeah.
So one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. I'm 5 years old, and my grandmother, love her to death. I mean, she was a pioneer in like alternative lifestyle, alternative supplements. Back before there was an internet, comes at me with that spoonful of cod liver oil, and the sweet, amazing grandmother instantly transformed into like, geriatric beast from hell with that horrible smelling stuff. But it's interesting, right? That is a product that's existed for centuries.
Right.
And it's great because a lot of these Mediterranean countries, a lot of like global countries have known the benefits of fish and omega-3s. Right. It's just now with the research that we're finding out why so it's definitely here to stay.
And they're able to infuse a little lemon with it now, so it's
exactly. Yeah.
Well, and that's actually another question. Do you see a preference there as far as taking it, from a spoon versus, encapsulated?
It's I think it's just personal preference. Yeah. Bioavailability, one of the biggest buzzwords in the industry, is not impacted from liquid to soft gel. Right. What we are seeing, and this is the conversation that's taking place in the omega industry, is how do you structure that lipid so your body absorbs more of it? Right. And that's usually like, adding some type of phospholipid to it, a phosphatidylcholine or a GPC, or taking a krill oil, which has a natural component to that. Or even as we look at some of the downstream metabolites of omegas, getting into these resolvins, protectants, myricins. It's kind of it's one of the oldest supplements on the planet, besides CBD, but we're just starting to kind of peel back the layers of the science and figure out how these things work and how we can make them better.
You just brought up the new fad. Maybe
the new fad,
maybe
yes.
Not, CBD. So talk to me about CBD. Are you guys involved in CBD?
Heavily, okay. Yeah.
So heavily.
Heavily.
Okay, so this is, because this is kind of a big deal. It's emerging right now. In the last 2 years, it's kind of exploded. So what's your perspective on CBD?
I just wrote a really interesting research paper on CBD, and I started doing the history, the deep dive on it. And, when you go back 10,000 years ago in China, 5,000 years ago in India, hemp is one of the oldest medicinal compounds on the planet. And then interestingly enough, you kind of look at the American history of this. George Washington grew this in his front yard. At one point in American history, it was illegal for the largest farms not to grow hemp, not only for the medicinal purposes, but the fibers for rope and the clothing. And then the cotton industry comes along. And so, typical of anything is one industry pushes out another one. So cotton becomes the big cash crop. And then in the 1930s, marijuana becomes demonized in what is basically a reverse immigration policy. So in California, they were looking to control the migrant population. And so what they said was, literally in the letter of the law, is that Mexican men were coming across the border, smoking marijuana, getting high, and soliciting sex from white women. So in that law, it became a way to detain and export migrant workers. Now, that was later overturned by the Supreme Court, but then in the 1960s, CBD, marijuana, all of this becomes a Schedule I drug, from the DEA. And that's on the same list as cocaine, as, heroin, as opium. And so
Schedule I is the worst.
Schedule I is the worst. I mean, this is the stuff that kills people. Right. And we've got a plant on there. Yeah. We've got a plant that makes rope and fibers. And it's interesting. When CBD kind of first hit the market, especially in the the manufacturing side, and the extraction technology for CBD or full spectrum phytocannabinoids is exactly the same as fish oil. So there's a lot of parallels in this. But we start hearing about it and we start talking about it as a company. And I grew up in the just say no generation. I grew up playing sports. So, like, you wanted to play sports, you don't do drugs. So I start hearing CBD, I start hearing hemp, and I have this visceral reaction. Like, that's a drug. I'm not going anywhere near it. So then as a scientist, it took me 6 months of really looking at the research, of really understanding this to say, that's not a drug, it's a plant. So then, we have this whole fad. We have the hemp farm bill that just passed, 6 days ago?
Right.
We have this big booming industry around CBD and full spectrum phytocannabinoids. Do I think that there's a lot here? Absolutely. Do I think that it might be a little too early on this one? Absolutely. I mean, there's some incredible benefits from this particular product, but I don't know if it's the panacea that everyone thinks it is. So there's going to be a lot of great research that comes out of it, but we really have to be, I think, cautiously optimistic as we start talking about this in therapeutic ways.
Does the CBD in and of itself, if you separate out all the THC, will it still have, or is it proposed that there's a beneficial effect to that, or does there need to be, a certain amount of THC in it for it to be effective?
A great academic conversations, right? So CBD and THC, two of the most prevalent of the 113 unique phytocannabinoids that comes from hemp. The idea is that they're antagonistic to each other, but then there is some synergies that takes place. So when you completely remove the THC and just leave the rest of the full spectrum phytocannabinoids, or even just isolate the CBD, the academic approach right now seems to think that it's not as effective. But then even with the hemp farm bill passing, what does that mean, right? So even if little amounts of THC, this thing could possibly be legal now, but it's not legal in the sense that if I'm a mailman, a federal employee, and I now test positive for THC, it's not covered under that. So now I'm losing my job because Congress just said that we can have this product, but then the DEA and the FDA and the government said, well, you still can't test positive for THC. So there's a lot of work to be done on this one, and there's going to be a lot of headache. But personally, I think you kind of have to have the synergistic blend of all of those.
Yeah.
We can talk a lot about the Epidiolex product, which is the GW Pharma's company's childhood epilepsy product. That was the first FDA-approved CBD isolate product. We've got, I believe, 3 new pending drug applications at the FDA for CBD-based products. So not only is there a lot of cool stuff coming down the pike, but there's an ultimate battle royale between dietary supplement and big pharma on this.
I was going to say, and that's kind of like this epic battle, that comes up because it's the speed of change and adoption on this, to me, has been startling. And we're going from, as you said, something that's completely vilified, and any reference point to marijuana, pot, hemp. Now suddenly, there's this explosion of, wait a minute, we've got this all wrong, and now you got to take entrenched ideas around it and dogma, really, and then you have to unwind it. And then, as you said, it's kind of multidimensional. You've got federal laws about you can't have this in your system, and at the same time, you got federal law saying we could farm it, produce it. So this is going to be kind of a cluster,
absolutely,
for a while,
of epic proportions.
Yeah. But now I'm the consumer saying, but wait a minute, there's some new, for lack of a better term, miracle supplement for me. And I want to maybe say, okay, I want to dip my toe in this water. What should I be looking for if I want to get CBD oil?
That might be the best question of all right now, and there's a multi-pronged answer to that one. First of all, I think continuity and consistency is key, right? So you've got all of these delivery systems. You've got gummies, you've got chocolates, you've got tinctures, you've got, the list goes on and on and on. The problem is that you don't have content uniformity in those delivery systems. So like the medical marijuana industry, like the CBD industry, with all of these different delivery systems, it's really been difficult to create a baseline of how does this stuff work? And so each person's reaction, each person's experience is different. I like to change that. I like to kind of just, go scientific and say, start with a soft gel. Start with something that's been tested for content uniformity. You know exactly what you're getting in every single soft gel. And you take that and you start with your 5 milligrams. Does that work for you? If it does, great. If not, titrate up a little bit. Go to 10. There's a lot of stuff out there that says, oh, just go take 200 milligrams of CBD. If you've never taken that before, you could be falling asleep at the wheel. You could be, Now granted, there's a great Facebook meme I saw, and it's like the number of CBD related deaths is now equal to that of the number of people gored to death by unicorns. So it's, I mean, there's not anything that's catastrophic that's going to happen if you're taking 200 milligrams of CBD. But like, if you're trying to go to work and be productive, and you're just staring at the wall because it has that kind of impact on you, don't do that. Be intelligent. Start small and work your way up.
Now, your company's making a big play into this arena, though.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what's the plan, as far as for you guys looking at your future, how does CBD fit in?
Well, it's much like omegas, right? So you have all of these unique constituent parts. With omegas, you only have like 3 or 4, EPA, DHA, DPA. With CBD, or with full spectrum phytocannabinoids, you have 113. And what we're noticing is that each one of these phytocannabinoids might have a unique impact on a specific condition. So as we break this whole thing apart, then we can start looking at putting these things back together in very cool ratios to attack things like anxiety, sleep, weight management. This is a big one. So there's a lot of preliminary research that says that CBD is good for appetite control. How many people are stress eaters?
Yeah.
I know me personally, like if I'm bored, like I eat when I'm bored. I walk around the house, I open up the refrigerator, I'm like, oh, that looks good. Or I'll do the lap and I'll close the refrigerator, walk back because something might magically appear in the, but how many people do that, are stress eaters?
Yeah.
Sleep, that's one of the biggest things, right?
Huge.
We've got blue light activation at night. People are glued to their phones, cortisol levels, all of these inflammatory markers and stress markers are so high in America right now. We need something.
And sleep medication, is one of the most prescribed drugs out there. And what's more natural than sleep? And of course, you're trading one problem for another when you're relying on these pharmaceuticals
Absolutely.
for rest as compared to a natural compound.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. I was doing a talk a couple weeks ago, and I said, start off, and I think it's like 200 people in the audience. I said, biological functions aside, what's the first thing you do in the morning? People kind of look around, and eventually someone says, I look at my phone. I'm like, yeah. And most people do that, right? They wake up, they might not even get out of bed, and they're looking at their phone.
Yeah.
Is it email? Is it Instagram? FOMO is now a clinical diagnosis, right? I'm like, people are freaked out because they missed something, that they saw on Instagram. So people are starting off with blue light activation and higher levels of stress. They go through their day, they sit in LA traffic. That alone is enough to, then you go home and most people are sitting in front of the TV, and then they wind down their day. And so then I ask, prior to going to bed, what's the last thing most of you do? People are like, look at my phone. Blue light activation. FOMO, all of these things. So it's no wonder, I think at the last report is like over 70% of Americans have trouble sleeping. And then you throw Ambien, Lunesta, some of these other ones on top of that, yeah, it's a Band-Aid for a broken leg. Right. But what we've seen, and especially some of the products that I've created for sleep, is that people are really lowering those levels, those stress levels, those stress chemicals, and they're able to enjoy better night's sleep. And that has a profound impact on your health. If you can't sleep, you're never going to recover.
Yeah. So it's exciting. It's exciting what might emerge here, and the fact that this old dogmatic stance is kind of being released, and now there's new possibility and opportunity.
Yeah.
And there you are, right in the middle of it. So
yeah, and I'm assuming we'll be right in the middle of all the legal that takes place. Cause it reminded. Do you remember the red yeast rice issue?
Yes.
From same thing. It's like that's exactly what it's going to be all over again, and. It's going to be a very interesting celebrity death match between Big Pharma and dietary supplements.
Well, I'll be there, observing it with great interest, and you'll be in there actually in the death match itself.
I think I will. What side I fall on remains to be seen, but it's one of those interesting things. There's so many great practitioners in the market. There's so many great brands in the market that I think could really take CBD or full spectrum phytocannabinoids to the next level and really help people as we uncover the science. And I think that's the thing of this, is that people have become so used to being sick and tired that they forgot what it's like to feel good.
Right.
And if we allow that product to end up more in a pharmacy company's hands, I think it's not going to get the full exposure that it needs to really help people remember what it's like to feel great.
Well, I'm in my own views, I think access to it should be not restricted, and you just have to again have consumers drive the market by making sure people have good practices. You keep using the term full spectrum. So should people, if they're looking for CBD right now or hemp oil, should they look for full spectrum?
Absolutely.
Hemp oil? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that they want to look for. Any other considerations to help them vet the product?
I think you should, like we talked about, kind of iHerb is, any company that puts their THC test on there. Because again, this is something where it might be legal. It might be legal in the state that you're in. Now that the hemp farm bill just passed, we're going to have some broad sweeping legislation that can change the legality of this in all states. But that does not mean, that your company acknowledges that. That doesn't mean that you could be taking a CBD product for sleep and then go test positive for THC. So I think it's paramount that you find a company that's reputable, that lists their THC tests. And I think the other thing about this is it's the gold rush, right? This is a land grab. Everyone's throwing up a website and saying, hey, I've got my CBD product. Right. I really recommend that you go with a company that doesn't have only CBD products. Find a company that's had a longevity in the dietary supplement space that hasn't built their entire business around one product. So they've done all of the legal research, they've done all of the vetting, right. And you can know that they're not hanging their hat on that one product, and they're not jeopardizing their entire business just to sell CBD and hop on a bandwagon.
Right. Yeah. You don't want neophytes, but people who do this for a living and have a track record of it. Yeah,
exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, this has been more than stimulating and exciting. So thanks for sharing all this information with us. It's really
my pleasure.
Really useful, and I wish you a lot of success in your future fight on this issue.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
Incredible context to learn that many different manufacturers are getting their materials from common sources, and that this has a big impact on what you buy and how it's utilized in your body. So really enjoyed bringing this to you. Thanks for tuning in. Let's keep going.